If you've ever been interested in the history of whaling, how they did it, why they did it, and why it stopped, I'll be going over everything in the video. In addition to explaining whaling, I'll go over the Netflix original anime Drifting Dragons. Drifting Dragons is an anime based on the manga by Taku Kawabata about the crew of one of the last remaining dragon hunting airships. As such, I will compare hunting whales to hunting dragons, which, believe it or not, hunting dragons is actually more dangerous than hunting whales. Although the hunting of dragons is shown to take influences from whaling itself. If you are new to the channel, and you probably are at this point, I'm Anime Lore, and I make videos on history, anime, and things related, hopefully every Saturday. These dragons, the hunting of which is called Draken, are both extremely dangerous and feared by townspeople, as they sometimes possibly attack towns, which is likely the cause for them to dislike drakers, due to superstition about drakers bringing dragons to towns, although this is likely a false correlation between dragons and drakers. But the dragons are ultimately highly valuable for their materials. Firstly, their oil, which is likely used in machinery as well as cooking, with it also further being refined for fuel. Also, sometimes higher quality oil is found in the cranium, which maybe could be used in perfumes like the whale equivalent I'll mention in a sec. The organs are used for medical purposes, and for its meat, which the anime is obsessed over, so much so the anime is honestly part cooking show about how to eat dragons. Although I will say the food does look pretty good. Lastly, the bones are also used for art. The materials wanted in whaling, by comparison, differed depending on the whale, but was also generalized, with sperm whales being the main ones hunted. Whales in general were primarily used for their oil, taken from the blubber or fat, which found uses from lubricants for machines, candles and illumination, and soap as a byproduct of candle making, and earlier on as medical ointments. In addition, baleen, a part of baleen whales, which was used to trap krill in the whale's mouth. Baleen itself was harvested to make fishing rods, umbrella ribs, brushes, and more, as well as a wax-like substance found in the craniums of sperm whales, similar to the special oil of dragons, with the wax-like substance being used in perfume making. As whale oil was being replaced by other products, whaling for their meat became possible with refrigeration. Although whaling boomed after World War II, due to food and oil shortages, whaling died out as whales were overhunted and the demand for it was lowered. In the late 1960s, whaling had mostly ended and officially ended by international treaties for the most part soon after, although Japan and Russia still maintain some whaling even to this day. All of these materials, both from dragons and from whales, were sold for a high price, and as I said, were used all over and for various uses. Although the costs involved in maintaining a whaling or dragon ship are fairly high, as such it's difficult to break even, especially for poorer ships. In addition, a large infrastructure was necessary to support the ships, such as shipyards for repairs, and places to sell their goods, especially for whaling, as shore stations were common before ships could process oil on board, and later factory ships capable of processing the entire whale on board. Making a profit would have been heavily luck-based, along with much waiting in between kills as the ship patrols passed where whales and dragons could be found, such as along ocean currents for whales, along wind currents for dragons, and other points when both would have a reason to gather in large numbers, such as early whaling done by the Basques, by hunting them when they had migrated for breeding. Even then, finding one wouldn't mean a catch, and a voyage would be several years of investment of time and money, which may or may not see a return on the investment. Once close enough to spot from the crow's nest on either a whaling ship or dragon ship, the sight of which could be hindered by clouds for dragons and fog for whales. After finding one, they would maneuver the ship for hunting. In the case of draken, once a dragon is found, the drakers would attempt to fire an anchor, which is a harpoon with 4 prongs, from a harpoon gun into the dragon to restrain its movements, likely hoping to tire it out should it attempt to run for an easy kill. Although at this point Mika would recklessly attempt to ride over the cable and finish the dragon up close with a lance. Normally though, while tied to the dragon, this is extremely dangerous for the airship, as depending on the size of the dragon, this could lead to unfortunate results. The least bad being the loss of a crew member going overboard, and the worst being a ship crash, with the ship being thrown into the ground or cliffs. From there, after harpooning the dragon, the Drakers would wear it down with Draken guns and propelled bomb lances, and if they can get close enough, finish it off with a bomb lance, which propels an explosive charge into the interior of the dragon. After the dragon is dead, they would moor it to the ship for processing later on the ground while its floor organs would still work. Early whaling, by comparison, used smaller whaleboats attached to a main ship. The whaleboats, once lowered down into the water, would stealthily approach a spotted whale. From there, the whale would be harpooned with a cable attached to the boat. The boat, however, could be separated and lost, flipped, or even taken under by the whale, but eventually the whale would tire out, if successful, and be finished off with a similar bomb lance to the enemy, although sometimes the whale would escape. Later innovations allowed for the harpoon gun, which was faster and more precise than the harpooner, as well as an explosive harpoon to slow the whale down, which was often done, particularly in Arctic hunting, to prevent the whale from diving under the ice sheets. And later, stealthier and faster boats, which enabled more types of whales to be hunted. The whale would then be hauled to the mothership before it could sink to process the oil. Later, factory ships were used to process the oil and meat, when that was an option instead. Once moored, and when the airship is able to land, the crew sets out to process the dragon. The crew of a whaling ship would tie the carcass to the side of the ship to process, though. Time wouldn't have been a major issue for dragons, as the main concern was processing the meat before it went bad. Unlike whaling ships, though, they had to fight with sharks for their kill. The crew would slowly hack away at the skin with pole-length knives, peeling it off like an orange, slowly removing the fat from the dragon and whales. Scales on the skin might have to be removed before the oil could be processed on the ship. The fat would then be boiled down in large pots until the oil is extracted from the blubber. Then the oil would be cooled in casks and barrels and stored in the ship's cargo bay. The oil would later be strained and bleached on land, and then sold to be used in various functions as discussed earlier. Well before the oil is processed, the meat would also have to be removed until there is only the bones left. The meat would either be cooked soon or have to be preserved to keep longer. Although as dragon hunting airships usually hunted their prey close to towns who would buy the meat, this wasn't really a problem, as it was for whalers, which is why whales were only really hunted for their meat when refrigeration was invented. Once the meat and fat was removed, that left the organs, which were processed into various medicines in the case of dragons. In addition, the bones of dragons and whales would also be used for art, called scrimshaw. At this point, baleen also might be removed. Overall, the processing of dragons and whales was a fairly exhaustive process, and could be dangerous as well, as the large pieces could easily crush a person, or in the case of whaling, they could slip and fall on the blood into the shark-ridden waters. Likely the ship would also stink for a while, which would require cleanup afterwards. In other words, meaning lots and lots of scrubbing the ship clean. Whaling, whether you maybe think it's admirable or horrifying, nonetheless was an extremely dangerous profession, but was needed at one point in history. And the anime Drifting Dragons clearly takes historical whaling and not only bases Draken after it, but also has expanded and differs with whaling in logical ways to make something I think equally as interesting as a premise. I would most definitely recommend watching the anime, as I enjoyed the unique premise and good execution at 13 episodes. And there's also an English dub if you can't do subtitles. If you liked the video and would like to see more from me, I would ask you to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you could, share the video with someone who you think likes history and anime and would enjoy the video.